I think you use OBS, right? For live streaming?
Yeah, for this I don't have OBS. I'm just in Streamlabs or whatever this is,
Mhm.
StreamYard. But yeah.
Yeah, I always mess up my live stream in one way or
Mhm.
another. So I have to like wait for those 30 seconds just to make sure everything's in place.
Fair. I actually use Twitch Studio now. That's part of the reason why I like going on Twitch now. I don't have to worry about OBS. Twitch Studio is
Gotcha.
like genuinely fantastic interface to stream. It's very similar to like StreamYard. But
Gotcha. Awesome. I can hear myself. So for the people wondering, we were just having a chat, and I'll quickly introduce the professor. The professor, also known as the Zach Mueller, that's his Twitter handle, is a MLE at Hugging Face. He is also one of the core contributors and core maintainers of Fastai. Among other things, he also has a YouTube channel. He has a fantastic course called Walk with Fastai. And apart from that, I don't even know how many things he's contributing to. So that's the intro I had for him. He'll be teaching us how to get started with world's best framework for deep learning Fastai and how can you contribute to its documentation. Zach, over to you. Thanks for
sure.
joining us.
Absolutely. Thanks for having me, Seem. I greatly appreciate it. All right, so let me go ahead and share my screen here quickly, and we can, yeah, sort of talk about this. So, as hopefully a good chunk of us know, FastAI is an excellent library when it comes to bootstrapping and quickly building a model, train your data set, and get it ready for deployment in PyTorch with minimal lines of code due to all the wonderful wrapping that it can do and its data block API and so forth. But one of the common frustrations behind the FastAI library is its documentation. A lot of people find it confusing. They don't necessarily find that it's documented like other libraries. For example, inputs aren't really documented very well, if at all. And the doc strings sometimes don't even make sense as to what's happening in certain circumstances. And given all this feedback, for the last 3 months, I have been working towards, with a few members of the community, introducing and integrating something called documents into NBDev. Now, Jeremy is not a big fan of sort of white space and a bunch of lines and whatnot in the source code, and especially when he's coding. He doesn't like repeating himself. And so he wrote this quick proof of concept called documents. And essentially how this goes is you write the comment for how you're documenting a function to the right of it. And then what documents can go and do is pull up this essentially documentation we've written. So for example, we have add here, where we have obviously a and integer is our first input. The integer is obviously the type, and the comment
Could you
string that we
zoom in a
want.
bit?
Yes, absolutely. We can zoom in a
That's
bit more.
perfect. That's perfect.
And
Thank you.
absolutely, we can even document return types and say what is it going to be. Something commonly done with something you'd expect out of, again, like NumPy, for example, with this example above. The difference is you can see that this is like 12 lines of code that was added. None were added here. Well, bar the 3 lines of code as each document is done on an individual line. So we save on white space without losing the readability because, everything is written right next to each other. And for those of you that have ever done anything in JavaScript or TypeScript, sometimes this is how you document things. So it's not like this is a new idea of how to document. It's just, it looks weird for Python folks because we expect everything to be in a doc string, right?
When did you learn JavaScript or TypeScript?
I
When
had
have
to
you
learn it
been
in.
doing these things secretly?
No, I had
You've
to
not
learn it
told
as
me
part
about
of
this.
my university.
Okay.
So I had to
makes
take
sense.
server-side and client-side programming. Failed it the first time, actually, so I had to retake it. JavaScript is very difficult for people who are mostly like CS focused. At least for me, it was. But so we have like this functionality here, right? Where we can do this document, but all we had so far was like getting the doc string and the annotation. We didn't have a way to actually show the doc. And this was basically what myself, Kevin B on the forums, Manny, and a number of other folks in the Discord basically wrote a PR to make that happen. Because Jeremy was kind of thinking, well, we might have documents in Fastai v2, but we sort of went, no, it's really good to have this in Fastai v1. And if we can get it there, we'll do something. We'll figure out some way to have it in Fastai v2 because it's important to have this documentation well. So we merged the PR quite literally 2 weeks ago and basically started doing what is now called the Fastai document sprint. With the wonderful end goal of having the entire Fastai library documented. Now, the one thing I haven't shown you is what a document actually looks like. So I'll, like, once it's rendered. So we'll give a quick example later on. First, I'm going to briefly talk about what this actually is. So I did an introductory stream last week, basically last week at this point, that basically catches you up. This stream here is going to be a TLDR of that. All the important bits you need to know, as well as covering some examples of like, what's your first PR like, how do you write good documents, and so forth. So get as much resources as we can to help you succeed, because the end goal is we want you, and yes, I'm pointing at you, every single person watching this, to make a document and contribute to the Fastai library. We are really trying.
I thought
our
you were
best.
talking to me.
I am talking to you as well. You haven't submitted one yet.
I'm just pulling your leg. Guys, I'll be having fun with Zach because we're good friends and I can poke fun at him just to make the live stream a bit more fun. So he doesn't
And
mind
I
me
will be
interrupting.
poking back.
He doesn't mind me interrupting. Even if it does, I'll continue doing it nevertheless. So that's what's going to happen.
It's going to be great. We're having a great time.
This is fine.
So yes, like the end goal is we want you, no matter what your software experience might be, it might even be your first contribution to open source. We want you to be a part of this because what we've been finding from the feedback is this sprint has helped a large number of people even just understand the Fastai library a little bit better by documenting one thing. You know, they learned, oh, this is how this behavior works, because they go in and, you know, started to investigate the code, understand how everything's going for one function. We're not saying, you know, oh, come here, document a whole notebook, you know, and that's our baseline. No, this is not your job. It's not even my job. I'm volunteering to do this. You know, we don't want you to say this is going to be some big commitment. You can submit one PR and God, I'll be ecstatic. And the nice thing about it is it's not like we're saying, let's refactor the library. Let's, you know, introduce this new thing. You're just documenting. And documenting is one of the best ways to make that initial contribution because it has immediate impact. The next time someone goes and visits the documentation for a function, they're going to see what you did. In the source code, they might not see it as much. You know, the maintainers do and people that look in the Git repository, it has an impact. But what you see is directly shown on a website to everyone else that goes and searches for help. And you made sure that someone else's life was made just a little bit easier by improving the documentation. Now, how is this whole thing being organized? Because if anyone's followed me on Twitter, you'll notice that I basically said I'm going to be streaming on Twitch, YouTube, and in the Discord at random moments and hopefully in order. So how in the world are we keeping track of everything? Most of the communication will live in the Fastai Discord, and this is a permanent link, so I'll go ahead and throw it here in the comments, potentially. Same, maybe you can, if you can get to this. I'll send it over in private chat for you.
I was trying to find it.
All good. And basically, the way that we have this set up is Jeremy is sort of taking a hands-back approach. Most of the trust is placed in us to help write documents. We ping him if we have questions on how something works, whether this format is good, That was definitely the initial start of the sprint, was very much so this sort of vibe. But we have 10 wonderful senior members of the community who are basically have said that they're going to commit to being a mentor for folks. This means they're going to be the ones reviewing your PRs. They're going to be the ones that you can ping in the Discord for help. There's even separate, if you go and make a PR, which we're going to see a little later, 2 people have to review your PRs. And so you can just find them in GitHub as well, if maybe you don't necessarily want to come to the Discord. Although, personally, I say you should, but that's just me. Now, a little bit more on that communication and sort of how this is all laid out. Inside the sprint is 45 open issues. That's horribly long, right? Well, it's for every single one of Fastai's notebooks. And so if there's a particular notebook you want to work on, for instance, let's look at one that's been highly talked in. The callback preds, which deals with like how you get predictions. If you open one of these issues, you'll notice that it has a label stating roughly what we expect its difficulty level should be. The document progress. So this is a tick box of what we believe should be documented. So in this case, this notebook is talking about MC dropout, which is basically, I want to say when you add dropout to when you're doing predictions. It's been a hot minute since I've looked at this stuff, but I believe that is what MC, yes, because it's Monte Carlo. And then here we see Kirian said that he would like to work on creating the document for it. We assign it to him. And then you can either talk here in the GitHub issue or ping back and forth on the Discord. But if we have like a bigger notebook, then multiple people can sit here and say, hey, I want to do this. I want to do this section. And so we're not stepping over each other's toes. It's kind of organized. And most importantly, you can sit here, look at these things and go, okay, callback scheduler requires someone with either advanced, expert, or moderate knowledge with Python, FastCore, or FastAI. I'm not quite there yet. So I can go sit here and look at the beginner and say, oh, let's tackle this one. Or if you are someone that's used FastAI for quite a while, you can try and tackle some of the moderate or advanced issues and see if you can help document and use your specific FastAI knowledge for this. Because what we currently have in the community is a lot of people who are really good at very specific things. And so what we want to try and do is leverage their knowledge as best we can to write this documentation for everyone else, because they went through the struggle of how does this work? How do I get this to work? How do I read this documentation well? And so they can directly give this feedback. And even if you're a beginner, you can absolutely still do this. Now let's talk about what in the world is a document, and sort of how do you do that? What does it render like, etc. We have a style guide that we've been working on to try and help everyone come up to speed with how do you document well. We went through a lot of different variations of what this looks like. Going back and forth with Jeremy for like, should self be on a new line? Do we even need to document self? Like, does it need a documentation for it? And essentially, a document should only be done if it's useful. So if it's something that is very obvious, or like the naming convention makes sense, or it's like self or class, you don't need a document for this because it's extremely straightforward. But for example, when it's not, say like, again, our addition thing here, then yeah, maybe not so much, we should document it. Now, we're going to use this example, and I'm going to throw it up in a Jupyter notebook for us to look at. But let's sort of talk about what this renders, because I've shown you like documents this, documents so cool. But I haven't shown you what that looks like in the documentation. So let's take a look at this. Now, A, you're going to hear me typing because I want to do this live, and I have a very loud keyboard. But B, all I have right now...
You don't have to flex your keycaps. I know they're like red switches, but you don't have to...
What do you mean? They're nice and pretty. Do you not see all my colors? I have to flex.
I'm in a more white state now, so no more RGB for me.
Fair. Now, I will say, in this environment, the only thing I have run is pip install Fastai and npdev for this demo. Ideally, you want to make a PR and fork the GitHub repo and whatnot. If you have no idea what any of that means, I'm going to go over it in a little bit and install it via that. We're actually working on a script to help make everyone's lives easier as well. So the first thing is we're going to do the so pet peeveable from npdev show doc import start. Now, to make everyone's sanity a little nicer, we can also just do show doc because we only want the show doc function. Now, here's our addition function we had earlier, right? I'll give it a default so we can see what that's like too. We have could be an integer or a float. Yeah, honestly, yeah, I'm kind of surprised by that too, Seam. Why don't you have an RGB keyboard? You're like the king of RGB. Explain yourself.
Now you're asking me about that.
Well, it came up in chat.
It has a mode, by the way. I'm just
so he's just being boring.
It's just active for
disabling the RGB
live stream. Yeah.
Fair. He has to be an adult right now. He can't show off his cool lights.
This is my work channel, guys. Please come to Chai Time Data Science. I'll show all colors to you. It's a pinned video there.
All right.
It's like the disco there. It's like the Las Vegas on there.
It's perfect. We'll add a document here on the return because that wasn't added in. And we'll say sum of A and B. Right, so here we have addition. Now, if I do show doc, which in Fastai brings up the documentation essentially, there's show doc and doc to mimic doc, or to mimic help. So like if I do show doc here, you'll see that before we just had this, right? We had this sort of addition, blah, 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 add two numbers together. And that was it. That's all you had. And you had to hope that the doc string was nice. And if it wasn't, then you go investigate the notebook for it. And you hope that the notebook ideally had some sort of extra information for you to know, some tests and whatnot. Well, now instead, we get a beautiful looking table that says what the type is, if it has a default, and if there's any details about it. And what we're now working on / fixing is if we reference bits in here, it will actually hot link to that documentation as well. And I'll talk more about why that's important in a second. But this is much more readable, much more verbose, and getting a quick understanding of how everything is supposed to work without having to repeat ourselves a whole lot when we're writing function definitions and writing documentation. And so this whole sprint is designed around this one thing. Now, the next question would be, what is good documentation? What is a good document, right? Because there are good documents and there are bad documents. And specifically, it's how you should think about what a user should do to explore the documentation. So for example, I could say like bringing up an example of something in the, oh, hey, Kevin. Yeah, I didn't even realize that was you that made the comment there. We could do something like DLS Quarks, which is a dictionary. And in Fastai, typically what this means is it's like keyword arguments that get passed to Fastai's data loader when you make something. I'm not going to bring up the example showing what that is, but just understand that's what it does.
Don't you want to add more context? Because like many people get like just being around the ecosystem, I know DLS stands for data loaders, but many people get confused by the fact itself that stands for data loaders. Should we be like, I don't know, maybe adding doc strings for that or more variable definitions?
I'm about to answer your question with an example.
Okay, go for it.
Because this is exactly what this is going to be. Because you are 100% right. This is very much so a trigger for some people because we just have random DLS quarks and that's it. That's all you get. And you got to go figure out A, what DLS means, B, what the heck those quarks mean.
Sorry for jumping the gun.
Oh, no, absolutely. This is totally fine. I'm here for it. Call me out on my mess. I need it. What we can do is make use of how NBDev documents things. And actually, let me make sure. We're going to very quickly check. Awesome. Yep. Doing something live on stream has always gone well. We just put a fix in for this, so it's actually really good to have it. So what we can do is
You know, sometimes I have to restart the kernel. Kill the notebook and relaunch it just when I reinstall some things. Maybe I'm like doing something stupid.
No, that's how it should be.
You just restarted it, right? For me, I have to like go back, shut down
Yes.
the Jupyter server, restart it, and then it works.
Oh, no, I never have to do that. That's weird.
I've done something stupid.
Oh gosh. So for example, to bring up, what Sam was talking about. So we have data loaders quarks, right? Now I could sit here, yes, and 100% say valid quarks are XYZ ABC 1, 2, 3, yada yada yada, and explain what all that means. That's horribly long, and the entire point is to keep it on one line. So how can we best leverage the documentation for folks? Instead, we say quarks going to data loaders. Now you're going to say, well, Zach, all you did was just put data loaders in a tick mark. How does that help me? Well, if this works how it should, which doc might, that doesn't. But what we're working on and what it will eventually do is in the documentation itself, in the live documentation, it will bring up a link to go to data loaders documentation. And so then what we can do is just say, oh, okay, keywords that go to data loaders. Yes, doing stuff on a live stream has always gone well, especially when things go mildly according to plan. But so then what we do is we don't have to sit here and say necessarily repeating a whole bunch of information, right? Because one of Jeremy's big concerns with this was, we don't want to have to repeat information in the doc strings because documentation is like source code. It can always be refactored. And it should always be refactored, just like source code is. Now, the more times I explicitly state, valid quarks are X, Y, Z, A, B, C. Okay, say I define this 20 times. All of a sudden, C is no longer a valid keyword argument. Now I have to go find everywhere I did C and delete it. Instead, if we leverage the hot linking that NBDev does by just saying valid quarks for data loaders, they can just go look at data loaders to see what all it takes. And sometimes you'll see something like at delegates, which will also fill that in for you. But in some cases, we have this. Now, it's Python magic. Don't necessarily worry about that if you have no idea what a delegates is. That's me going partially too far, so we're going to bring it back. And so this is how we can sort of get away with linking documentation efficiently by providing a clear path to the user of how to find information without having to make it horrendously long or difficult to refactor or review. We can just say, okay, how do we write this efficiently and effectively to get people the information they need to know the fastest without making it technical debt for ourselves later on? And so that is how you write a good document. And that went much better than my Tangent Monday did. So if there are questions on this, do speak up. Say you can 100% call me out for anything that was confusing and say that I lied about everything. This makes no sense and I'm doing a horrible job.
This makes perfect sense to me, so I don't have any questions. I don't see any in the chat either.
Perfect. If I can successfully teach it to you, that means probably everyone else got it too. That's amazing. Thank God. Okay.
Yeah, thanks for keeping me the low bar, Zach.
Hey, I worry about that. No, I'm kidding. I'm kidding. You're smart. You're brilliant.
It's out
You're just
there
my
now.
only live feedback I have outside the chat.
Now you said it. You can't take it back.
No. All right. So now let's talk about an example of how we would write a document and create a PR. So the first thing you're going to want to do is fork this repo. Now, it might have you fork the Fastai repo. If that's the case, don't stress on that too much. We're working on getting that all sorted out. It's mostly because it's a fork of Fastai and everyone's PRing to a fork. It's very strange. But so for example, say after you've forked the repository, right? And you want to make a PR and write something. So you're going to clone your repository, right? And do all that nonsense. And then what I like to do is create what's called a branch. So when we look at a Git repo, for those that are new to it, if we do git branch, typically it will say either master or main, depending on if they switched over that naming convention.
Can we talk about that username?
What? The Joven?
Yeah, what does that stand for? Where did that come from?
Oh, I should probably talk about that a little bit at least. So I'm the weird one in the group, and I work at a Docker. So this is not my local system. This is actually running on a Docker environment on the laptop to the right of me. And I SSH into it, and that's why this is live on a server. This little bit right
When
here.
you said Docker, I figured there's no point discussing it from there.
That's fair. The TLDR is, this is the base Jupyter Notebook Docker image, and that is your username.
Makes sense.
So yeah, if we do git branch, right, say this would be like master. What I would then do is ideally create a new branch by going git branch -b, or sorry, not git branch, git checkout -b to specify a new branch. And we'll call this, weights and biases string. That says I switched to new branch. The next thing I want to do is pick a notebook. So we're going to do the Vision Learner notebook as our very basic demo. I'm going to run a few cells and get down to where I want to document. And I want to document, if I look at my cheat sheet, create body. Now, for those of you that have seen FastAI's like very quick learn equals CNN learner, data loaders, ResNet 34, right? Ignore the typo there. When we do that whole like splitting of the model and freezing the backbone and everything, create body gets run as a part of it. But you might not know that, and this might seem very strange because it says cut off the head of a typically pre-trained arch with cut, defaulting to the first pooling layer. And yes, do tell me if my comedy is horrible. I will not take offense to it. I would rather this be educational than that. If not, I just tend to like to have fun. But so we have basically this very bare bones documentation of what create body does. I can see that I have an arch. I have no idea what n is. N means. Does that mean like the number of inputs it wants? The number of channels? I have no idea. Pre-trained, I could probably guess what that means. And cut, it says cut, but I don't really know what a cut is.
I was going to interrupt and say also, like, I've been reading so much code on Kaggle. Someone would say, I don't know what arch means.
That's also very, very valid. So let's quickly see how we can improve this. Now, the first thing is, if it makes sense, add a type into it. We successfully managed to convert Jeremy into saying, hey, let's get types in here. Because if you notice, a lot of FastAI is not typed. Not strongly typed, at least. So since we actually make use of the typing, we're going to bring it in. Now,
this might be an opinionated thing. Sorry to interrupt you, but
no.
like, is there a possibility you end up overdoing it? Or is it like, in your opinion, always a good practice to do that?
Absolutely, you can overdo it. And that's sort of what that tangent was earlier of whether or not a document's needed or not. Like, for example, let me open up a PR real quick where I believe, talked about that.
I was just referring to typing. So if you end up,
oh yeah, yeah, like too much typing, absolutely. Like we're not doing something like, if something's union, you might see like typing.union int float. We don't do that. We do bare bones, making use of Python int float. Makes sense. Now, when it doesn't make sense to do typing is if it's very extraneous and it's not exactly a specific type that we want. So, for example, Arch falls into this category. It's architecture in this context. I'll write the document first. An architecture generator, which is just a basic example. I mean, technically, I could say, since it's a generator, the callable. But I wouldn't even do that personally. And really, when we think an architecture generator, we can go back and forth on this same and everyone else right now if we want to as well. Basically, I want to say is it's a function that is called where we pass pre-trained into it to get the model. So for example, this would be like torch vision .models.resnet34. I wouldn't pass in the whole model. Instead, it's an architecture generator. So it's the function that generates a model. So actually, we could say a function that returns a model. There we go. And when you submit a PR with whatever your document might be, we'll absolutely go back and forth into, what is the best way to write this document? What is good? What is bad? And so forth. Now here, I wouldn't do that callable really, because I'm not 100% sure doing that makes sense. The document alone is pretty explicit in what it does, and it could be different depending on what you're doing. So just saying a function that returns a model pretty much says what it means. Now let's get into the more trickier parts. So nn, what in the world is nn? So if I'm looking in here, I see it goes to update first layer. And if we go to update first layer, I again have an nn. And really, here we go. Change the first layer based on the number of input channels. All right, so we can say the number of input channels. Now nn makes sense. And we don't have to say n input channels, because in Fastai, we generally like to keep the variable names kind of short, ideally without losing meaning. Now we could say whether to grab the pre-trained weights. So here we'll say that should be an integer. Here that should be a Boolean. Now, cut's where things get a little weird. Because if we look at the code, we see this like if cut is none, go and do a thing. Otherwise, if a cut is an integer, go do a thing. Or if it's a callable, do a thing. So my typing, if we follow that, is either going to be a none integer or a callable. And really, we can just say integer or callable. We don't really need none type. None type doesn't help too much. Yes. We did type that as an int. Stream might be slightly behind, which is okay. So now that sort of helps a little bit. So what is cut, right? So cut is essentially a way that we're going to cut off the head of the model. Like for a ResNet34, that's going to be that last layer, right? Because if we've done the Fastai course, we understand Fastai creates a model by cutting off the last layer, adding on its own head, and we fine tune. So this does that first part. We cut off the head. So we'll say either is an index to cut the model at, or a function, either an index or a function to cut the head of the model with. Right now that makes sense because it's a layer index here, or it's a function here. Now, as a result, we sort of are repeating some information here, aren't we? Because we should expect that given this information, we can actually not repeat ourselves with the docstring. So let's rewrite this a little bit. We could say, cut off the head of an arch, defaulting to the first pooling layer if cut is none. I say that because we already went pretty long in how we have this document string here, and this kind of makes sense. So now we have a documented function. And when we do show doc, create body, here it is. We have our document that makes perfect sense. It's rendered, and we've taken this weird create body function, which even I had trouble understanding in the beginning when I was learning Fastai, and turned it into something nice and readable and helpful for both beginners and advanced users of Fastai. All right, so Kevin says, maybe a bit of nitpicking, but I would shorten document to an index or function used to cut the head of the model. Yes, very, very true. An index or function to cut the head of the model. We'll actually say cut off. Now, and this is why it's important that I wanted this to be a community sprint, because you're going to think something's really good. You're going to think, yes, this is exactly how it should be explained. But because we sort of have a rule here now where two people have to review every PR, you get two different perspectives of, does this make sense? For me right now, that is Kevin in the stream and Saeed. That is my two reviewers that I have to make sure they align and all of us make sense. And that's very important because something that makes sense for you doesn't necessarily make sense to someone else. And the other thing we want to do with these documents is make sure that it's quick and to the point, and there's no extra bits, in how we describe something.
You have my chai approval, don't worry.
Thank you. I appreciate it. Terrifying the amount of trust you have in me, but I appreciate it. So now we have this beautiful document, right? So I've done this one single function. Great. Now let's go learn how we make a PR. These are, for those who haven't seen this before, this is where Fastai's tests live. So if I run this, it'll quickly test everything that we can worry about with create body. That needs to stay there. And really, I was gonna. Oh yeah, we went through that. So what do I do now? I made an adjustment. I made a PR, or I need to make a PR. I need to figure out how to do all this nonsense, right? Now the first question is, well, could I have just updated the Python file? And the answer is no, because Fastai is built with NBDev, and so that's why we work out of a notebook. Because the other nice thing we could do with that notebook is run that show doc create body and see how the documentation is going to be rendered. You don't get that in a Python file. And so we can't see whether or not this looks nice, which is very important. So now that we're done with that, we're going to do two functions. NBDev clean notebooks. This removes any sort of metadata that you might have, especially if you're doing a case where if you follow some of the tutorials, they say like, well, you can do some things in Colab. Even I did some things in Colab. This is how that would operate. And then you do NBDev build lib, which what these two do is A, remove all the metadata, and then B, convert all of our notebooks into Python files. So you can see it's going through every single notebook and taking every single one of those little source code bits and throwing it into the Python files. If I do like git status, you can see that we adjusted really to, I know readmes, but we're going to ignore that for right now. We can see that it said, okay, we modified learner.py and learner.ipy notebook. Now, the last thing we're going to do is build the documentation for this specific notebook. So we're going to say nvdev build docs. I can do a -h to see the help. And the one that I care about is file name. So we're going to say nvdev build docs and point to 21 Vision Learner. If I can actually remember to pass in fname. Now what it's going to do is convert our notebook into a HTML file. This is how Fastai magically is able to take a notebook, convert it into the Python file and the Jupyter notebook, and all of, or the Python file and the documentation. This is how all that is automatically done. So now we have this, and I've seen that it all makes sense. I'm going to go ahead and I'll do the first part on here, but then I'm going to switch computers for a moment. Actually, I think I should be able to just do this very quickly. And you can tell that I thoroughly planned this, especially the part where I realized, oh, wait, I don't want people to know my GitHub secret. I'm quickly going to VS Code here. Let's see. And we're going to go to Zach. Document.
I thought you'd literally switch computers.
No. No. This is on the other monitor for a moment. I was about to be like, wait, no, we don't need that. So now I can do git status, right? We have our things. I can, if everything is modified, fun fact, you can do git commit am, which runs git add, and also commits. So we'll say document create body. And it says, okay, cool, we updated some things. Now we do git push origin weights and biases stream. Why it doesn't like that, I don't know. It could be because I did the ampersand. There we go. Yep, it was the ampersand. Note to self, Git branches don't like having special characters. Cool, I wrote my PR. What's next? Or I've made my adjustment.
Can we add emojis to them? Can we add emojis in terminal? I've never done that. Let me try that.
That's a good question. I know I've seen my coworkers do that, where they like add a commit message of the hugging emoji.
You can type no in an emoji. I just did that. You can do that in a terminal, but I'm not sure if you can do that in a commit message through the terminal, through the CLI.
That's interesting. I'll find that out after this, because I do kind of want to know if I can spruce things up and make it as unprofessional as I possibly can, but also make it professional. Because
this is the absolute cutting edge of software engineering. That's what we're doing here. We're solving the unknowns.
I swear to God, I majored in software engineering. I swear. All right, so now what I'm hoping this will do is not crash horribly. It might. There we go, beautiful. And we can see I'm opening a pull request into my master branch here. For the record, if you need to do what I just did, there are directions to do that in the Discord. There's a ton of handy things that you learn how to do through the Discord that we just have in a separate channel. I'll show that in a little bit. But we're going to say documented create body. Now, the next thing I can do is if I go to reviewers, ideally don't select Jeremy unless it's really needed, but select two people that you want to review your PR. Now, for the sake of this demo, I'll select two and deselect two so they don't get unnecessarily pinged, but I'll go probably, Dr. HB works with Vision a lot. He might have some expertise and knowledge on what this works and how this works. And then I'll do Manny as well because he does.
Don't you want to tag Kevin?
Why do I not tag Kevin? Because he helped us write the thing. He's biased now.
Makes sense.
But so say we added those two. The other thing we can do is now you can either do this or we will do this. In the projects, you can select document sprint if you so choose. This is basically just how we keep track of things to make sure if issues open. Ideally, you don't necessarily have to do that. And then you just, actually, there we go. That's what I want. That works. We're doing great. It's early in the morning for me still. So then I'm just going to say create pull request. Yes. And if you are intimidated by whether or not, like, who is the right person? Oh, God, how do I know if I picked the right person? We'll pick 2 mentors out for you and just figure that out, because it is very intimidating, because you're like, I'm going to pick 2 names, and that's going to send them an email to say, hey, look at this thing I wrote. Oh, God. And that can be intimidating, especially if it's your first PR. And that's okay to just leave it in our hands to figure out who is the right person for this. Now, you'll get this PR. It'll say files changed with everything that happened, which is what we'll look at. We'll take a look at, mostly we'll make comments on the document itself in here, and then have you go update the notebook and do everything else. There's not really a good way for me to do add suggestion, have it trickle back into the notebook when you say add suggestion too much. So that's why we do it this way. It's easier for us to review. But I can see, okay, cool. Yes, I did what I said. I created a document for create body, and I selected 2 reviewers. And then the reviewers will come in. You'll have some back and forth. The CI should absolutely pass. The only reason the CI would ever fail is if you forgot to do the clean notebooks or build library. That nbdev _ clean notebooks and nbdev _ build lib. And then we'll sit here. We'll check it, grade it, see how you did. And then after some back and forth, because we're never going to say, this PR is horrible, why have you done this? Get it away from me. We're going to work towards getting it in the library no matter what the starting point is. Once it's there, you have cemented yourself as an open source contributor. And once the sprint has ended, we're going to load all of the PRs that have ever been done on this fork into a Fastai PR. It will keep that Git history. And so you will have officially been a contributor to Fastai. And the best part is you have a team of at least 10 people directly here to make sure you get to that point. So if at any time you're intimidated by, oh my God, this is so much I have to do, there's too much information at once, we're available in the Discord to help you step by step and make sure that you can get there, because we want you to help. We don't want to have this barrier of, oh, this seems too complex, because that's how it's been. And it's just because, honestly, on our fault, we haven't really taken the time to do something as organized as this, to show everyone, here's how you do it outside of, Jeremy's courses and my courses. This is a much more interpersonal version of that. And that's basically it. That is documents. That's what we do. That is how we're doing it. But you are still on your private repo? Yes. So basically what's going to happen is at the end of this sprint, I'm going to go to the Fastai repo, make a new pull request, compare from my fork, and just to show that everyone still gets to keep what they did. You can see I'm going to create a pull request from the head repository of mine. And you can see over here, we don't have too many people that have helped yet, but we have a few. It keeps the entire commit history of everyone. And so as a result, the moment I hit create pull request, I'm not going to do that now because we're not ready, and it gets merged, that's how what you did for this sprint gets thrown into Fastai. Excellent question. I always worry if someone's going to ask that one, because it's a great question to ask, and I'm not sure if it was obvious or not to new people. So good. Git can be very confusing, especially in how code ownership and whatnot goes. Excellent question. So I guess the last little bit is, what does the Discord look like? Because I've shown you, here's the issues. If you want to look at how everyone's doing, we have a project open. over here in the GitHub that shows, what the sections all are split up, so you don't have to go search through 1.5 million issues. But how is most of the communication happening? So we will talk about that. Give me just a moment, because I realized I quit. I closed out of Discord so that we wouldn't be spammed by things. So give me just a moment. But we have the Discord community, right? And as it's starting, because Discord is deciding to be extremely slow and not have its coffee first thing in the morning. There we go. This is what I want.
I was looking at the chat and you caught my attention immediately.
Yes. All right. So now we'll go back to sharing my screen. So this is the Fastai Discord. I'm ignoring that ping for right now. Right. And so we have,
That
all
was
of
me
our...
tagging you, by the way.
Oh, of course it was. Probably saying we're doing the stream. Can you tell I haven't even looked at Discord or opened it yet? And what you'll see in here is, for those that have been familiar with it, we used to have essentially this main channels, ask for help, study groups, and voice channels. Now we have this section dedicated to the document sprint. So in general, you can see this should be used for general communication, questions pertaining to what certain Fastai code does. You probably can't see that well, and I apologize. I'm going to do my best to read it. And how best to document something, and so forth. Resources is a pinned channel that only I can edit, where I basically drop any useful information you might need relating to the sprint. So for example, it has a link to the base repository, directions for your first PR, the style guides and whatnot. If you are too afraid of just throwing your PR into the Fastai repo and saying, please come trash my code, tell me how I did, we have this ask for review channel, where it's a much more informal approach to, here's the function I did. Can someone tell me how this looks? We'll go up to an example, say, because I haven't been able to do it too much. Luke here wrote one where he was like, hey, I'm working on the tabular stuff. Can someone tell me how this starts to look? And we'll basically give him feedback to get him started before it's as intimidating as a full-blown pull request. And then there is a completely separate channel for anyone who is completely new to submitting your first PR and you're confused on anything. You can ask questions in here. And those of us that are mentors, which you can, if you so choose, add us with @mentor, but really it's look for anyone with a green name in the Discord. You can ask any questions in here if you're struggling, hitting issues, and so forth, and we'll be able to help you out and make sure that you get your first PR in. We have that first success, which can lead to more successes. And so hopefully you get the vibe of, we are trying to do literally everything we possibly can to make sure that if you want to do open source, you can. If you don't, I have failed and I will quit. Don't quote me. But that's it. That's the sprint. That is what we do, how we're going to do it, what it's all going to look like, and sort of how you can get in on the fun.
Awesome. I'll just wait if there are any final questions. Otherwise, we can wrap up. But this was really helpful. I'm hoping people in here would at least send 5-6 PRs, maybe more. Hopefully, we'll see.
That is the hope. That is always the hope. Yes, we converted one.
We converted one.
Fantastic. Can't wait to see any questions you might have and what your PR looks like. I'm very excited.
Amazing. Let me quickly grab this. Awesome. I'll wrap up since I don't see any questions, but I'll mention that
I won't quit. Promise.
You can find Zach on Twitter at the Zach Mueller. He also has an awesome YouTube channel where he uploads lectures, live streams. I think the live streams are on Twitch.
Yes. Twitch,
Okay.
YouTube, Discord. Depends on my mood.
Basically, find him on either of these platforms. Twitter, again, you can look up Zach Mueller on YouTube and Twitch. You'll find him there, or just find him on Fastai Discord. He'll be replying to every third message, if not the second one.
Basically.
We have one question that I think we have to answer. RPR is limited to the main Fastai repo.
Yes. So that one I probably would like a little more context in what you're asking, but if it's generally hopefully my computer. Oh, there we go. My mouse froze for a moment. Thought I'd like completely destroyed everything. So if your question is basically like, is this just around FastAI, or are we planning on doing like other repos? For right now, this sprint is very much so an experiment. This is the first time we've ever done anything of this magnitude with the community. And so we're trying to see how this goes, and it's going very well. We did have some talk of if we wanted to do this for Fast Core as well, because that library is even more mysterious. And so we're kind of trying to do, yes, thank you. Yes, awesome. I am answering this question. Fantastic. When it comes to like Fast Core, NBDev, eventually, yes. This sprint and scope, no. Mostly just because we want to try and focus on one first, and trying to juggle more apples than we can really hold well isn't the best use of our resources. So will it come in the future? I have no doubt. What it'll look like, how it'll look like, I'm not 100% sure. But the goal eventually is, yes, since this is an NBDev, anything can use documents. If you go look in FastCore, I think I even documented some things at one point. Even NBDev has documents for all of their like command line stuff, like NBDev build docs and everything. So yes, more news on that soon. Chris asked the question of, is it just for docs or new functions?
Or like feature generation for time series and tabular. That's
so
ambitious.
That's a very good question. Yes. So for right now, it's just the documentation, but that's just because we're going off of what's in the library right now. If you want to do that, in the main FastAI repo, put a PR for it. You can include documents if you so choose. I don't know if Jeremy's going to say yes or no to that. He'll probably say yes. That's what we're aiming for anyways, I hope at least. And get it in the main library. Because basically what I'm doing is every 2 or 3 days, I'm rebasing my branch or my fork on FastAI's repo. So any changes that occurred that affect like source code, new functions and whatnot, I'm making sure can be a part of the sprint. And we're not like, oh, we did 100% of the library, except because this has been going on for the last 2 weeks. 5 new functions were added and we forgot to do them. So it's not really 100%. No, we genuinely are trying to get that 100%. So if you want to include something new in FastAI, do it in FastAI itself. This is just for documentation revamping. Great questions, Chris and Bharat. Excellent questions.
Also, this is all to elaborate on that. This is all community effort, right? This is all in our free time, something we're mad passionate about. Zach agreed to join this live stream, even though he's already done it. This is basically just to get more people involved. So it's he's joining us on a Saturday morning. It's Saturday, right?
Yep, it's Saturday. It's Saturday, like 11 o'clock or something like that.
Yeah.
Yes, I'm not paid to do any of this. None of the volunteers are paid to do this. You know, we just care a lot about this library. I've never been paid by Jeremy to do any of this, no matter how insane that might seem. I just decide to code in my free time because somehow that's fun.
It's called recreational coding, Professor.
Sure. We can call it that. It makes it sound less like we have no life and no friends.
Yeah, let's not say that on the live stream. And on that note, we can. I don't see any questions. As a reminder, find Zach on Twitter, find him on YouTube, on Twitch, chat with him on the Fastai Discord. And yeah, I'm sure he'll be active across all three channels. Thank you so much again, Zach, for teaching us how to do this. And I really hope
Absolutely.
for you, the audience, please send a few PRs Zach's way. Tag him if you're afraid to tag other people in the review section.
Yeah, that's fair. That's fair. Thank
Awesome.
you so
Thanks
much for having
everybody
me
for
on
joining.
here. This was a lot of fun. Yes, as you said, I've done this already once, but I will do it as many times as it takes to get even one new person into open source because it can be fun.
Yeah,
Genuinely.
totally. Awesome. I'll end the live stream here. Thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.